justice. The presentation portion of tonight's session will be recorded. My co-host, Anna Foppe, will keep the speakers highlighted when they are presenting, and she also mutes all the rest of us during the presentation. You then decide when to unmute yourself during the Q&A time. We have 3 speakers tonight, so I'm going to turn things over to Dave Gokin, who will make some connections between this congregation's faith perspective before he introduces our speaker.
Yeah, making a connection of our ELCA beliefs and policies to the topic this evening comes from an African-American ELCA pastor, Lenny Duncan, who came to the pastorate in a very non-traditional way. Mr. Duncan was on the street by his teens, engaging in prostitution, drug abuse, and crime. He served time in jail and prison. As Pastor Duncan tells us, he fell in love with ELCA. We are lucky to have him. He wrote a book called Dear Church, and I will read a few passages from this book now. We are the offering to end white supremacy in this nation and church. We can enter this new phase of American theology willingly, or we can fight it every step of the way. Either way, I am convinced that the call of the church in the 21st century is to be the vanguard on this new battleground. We must enter this fray with wild abandon. We cannot pause to see it if the ground will be firm, or make sure that our entire confessed theology falls in line with every partner we make on the way. People are dying, and our secular leaders are more than okay with it. They have assumed the role of empire and could not care less about who gets hurt along the way. We worship in a prison nation where 90% of federal prisoners haven't even seen a trial. The poor are offered deals in holding cells with 40 other prisoners by a public defender who doesn't even know their name. I myself signed away my life to these prosecutorial agreements multiple times, not because I was guilty of what I was accused of, but solely because I couldn't afford bail. My choices were simple: languish in jail for 12 to 19 months for a joint's worth of pot, or take the deal, accept the felony on my record, and get out that day. This was after waiting 3 to 6 months to get a preliminary trial, 3 to 6 months of subhuman conditions, violence, abuse by guards, lack of proper medical care. I spent years in jail over a period of a decade. Those lost years weren't due to the severity of my crime, but solely to socioeconomic conditions beyond my control. By the time I looked up, I was a multiple-time felon. I repeated this cycle several times. I would be released on probation, put out on the street with little or no support systems, and instructed to do in 28 days what I had never been able to pull off: get a job, get sober, stay out of trouble, and find a place to live. I couldn't get a job with any upward mobility. Whole neighborhoods wouldn't rent to me. I couldn't get financial aid to go to school. The prison extended far beyond the grounds of the jail itself. I saw people beaten within an inch of their lives by fellow prisoners, experienced dehumanization by the guards, and witnessed the profiteering of the canteen companies that sold us products on the inside. But the most insidious part of the system was how seamless it all was, a system that most of the public never bothered to examine. White supremacy doesn't need active racists to function. It is a demonic system with a life of its own. It is radical evil. It functions with interdependent systems like militarism and capitalism. They reinforce each other in cycles of death built on the backs of Black and brown bodies, literally and historically. But you don't have to invest personally in companies like payday loan companies that take advantage of persons of color communities. Wall Street is taking care of that for you. You don't have to counter-protest against Black Lives Matter. You don't have to fly Blue Lives Matter flag. You just have to be bemused or confused when you see the scenes of the Quick Trip going up in flames in Ferguson, Missouri, played on an endless loop on CNN. The blue wall of silence is really the blue wall of violence. Passivity is the new engine of systemic racism. You must have to believe this. You must have to believe that this is the way things are. With that, I'm turning it over to the speakers to elaborate on Mr. Lenny Duncan's. I'm going to introduce our speaker, Inez, first. Inez Bordeaux joined Arch City Defenders, I'll let her explain what that is, in July 2019 as the manager of community collaborations. Inez believes in holistic legal advocacy work at ACD, and over the past 10 years, ACD efforts have inspired to want to do more. She first was introduced to ACD in 2013 when she was going through a challenging time and was made a target of a racist criminal legal system. Inez's background is in healthcare, and she worked as an LPN for 14 years. In 2018, she spent the last year volunteering as an organizer for the Close the Workhouse campaign. In her current role, Inez works with partner organization advocacy groups, organizers, and activists to build relationships that allow Arch City Defenders to reach common goals of community well-being. Our next speaker is Malik Alim, and he is an organizer, journalist, and host producer of the Re-Up podcast. He has served as a membership co-chair for the Black Youth Project 100, a national collective of young Black organizers. As the Illinois organizer for the Roosevelt Institute, a public policy think tank based in New York City, he was responsible for cultivating and training a network of college students across the state in policy change advocacy. As a longtime affiliate of Chicago Votes, he has organized large-scale voter registration and turnout campaigns and taught civics in CPS Chicago Public School high schools. Malik is a former reporting fellow at City Bureau, a civic journalism lab on the South Side. He's also a member of Let Us Breathe Collective, an alliance of artists and activists organizing through a creative lens to imagine a world without prisons and police. And finally, our last speaker for the evening is Marie Franklin. She's the lead organizer for United Congregations of Metro East. She also the statewide organizer for Illinois Network for Pretrial Justice. She has been an advocate activist since her days as an Illinois State Police officer. Currently, she is president of the Concerned Citizens of Precinct 12 and an active member of New Life Community Church. She takes great pride in dismantling systems that breed social injustice. I won't say how old she is, but she gave that to me. And she has 2 daughters and 2 grandchildren and another grandchildren about to come on March of 2021. So Inez, would you mind starting out for us?
Sure. Hi, my name is Inez Bordeaux. I am the manager of community collaborations at Arch City Defenders. Arch City Defenders is a holistic legal advocacy organization that focuses mostly on civil rights and racial equity in the St. Louis region. We are a legal advocacy group that sues police departments and cities who prey upon Black people and poor people and mistreat and discriminate against members of the LGBTQ community who do things like break up homeless encampments for the unhoused. And the core of our work is based really around 4 pillars: community collaborations, media and policy advocacy, civil rights litigation, and direct rep. And just very quickly, direct rep means that when people come to us, when they fill out applications with us and they need help with traffic tickets or getting their warrants recalled or help with an eviction or even a criminal case, we have lawyers who work directly with clients to represent them in those ways. And then our civil rights litigation department, or CivLit as we call it, that is the department that does things like sue St. Louis City for behind the conditions of the workhouse. They have sued St. Louis City and the 22nd judicial judges for the unconstitutional bail practices that are happening in St. Louis. And then our media and policy advocacy, they just really focus all of their time and energy into telling and uplifting the stories of the impacted communities that Arch City Defenders serves. And then community collaborations is really just a fancy name for organizer. My job as the manager of community collaborations, like Dave was saying, is to build relationships with other organizations, activists, advocacy organizations that share this, who share a vision for a more just and equitable St. Louis for really all of us, or a region for all of us. And in my role as manager of community collaborations at Arch City Defenders, I'm also an organizer with the Close the Workhouse campaign. Actually, I was an organizer with the Close the Workhouse campaign before I started at Arch City Defenders. I have so much that I can say about the campaign, but I have a very limited amount of time. So I'm really going to focus the bulk of my conversation around this cash bail and how it negatively impacts our community and how it really ties into so many of the other racial equity outcomes that we want, and how it keeps people basically in jail. Penalizes it, it criminalizes poverty, basically. So the Close the Workhouse campaign started in 2018. It was after that historic heat wave that we had in 2017, where there were people hanging outside of the windows of the workhouse, waving flags and crying out for help because it was 115 degrees outside in St. Louis. And that means because there's no air conditioning inside of the workhouse, it was 125 degrees inside of the workhouse. And this campaign really grew from that moment. Now, the workhouse has existed for over 150 years in one of two forms. And for about 149 years, people have been calling the conditions inhumane and unacceptable, and bringing, talking a lot about what people are having to endure inside of these facilities. So this campaign is not the first campaign to close the workhouse. It's probably the 7th or 8th, but this campaign has been the most effective out of all of them. So when we launched this campaign, it was based really on 4 demands that we wanted. We wanted the workhouse closed and another jail not opened in its place. We wanted to do this idea that I'm sure we've heard a lot about recently since the murder of George Floyd, this idea of re-envisioning public safety. This idea of divesting from the carceral system and investing in people. You've heard it probably described a couple different ways: to fund the police, care, not cops. Like, all of these things mean the same thing. There are so many cities across the country where the bulk of our budgets are going toward the police and jails, and that leaves very little money left over to actually fund the things that actually make us safe, make our city safe, make our community safe. So between closing the jail, the demands were close the jail, not open another one, and re-envision public safety by divesting from the carceral state and ending cash bail. Cash bail is the thing that allows the workhouse to live and breathe. The workhouse is a living, breathing monument to white supremacy and racism in St. Louis. And I can say that unequivocally because 90% of the people that are inside of the workhouse are Black. St. Louis City is 49% Black. Of those 90% of the people inside of the workhouse that are Black, 90% of that 90% is their pre-trial, meaning that they've been accused of a crime, but they have not been convicted of anything. And literally the only reason that they are still sitting in that building is because they're too poor to buy their freedom. It's not because they're a criminal or because they're dangerous. It's simply because they're too poor. And I think over the many, many, many years of what I like to call propaganda that we've been fed in this country, everything from the movies that we watch to the TV shows that we watch and officer friendlies and things like that, we've all been brainwashed to believe that if you are in jail, you're a criminal. If you are in jail, you're a bad person. If you're in jail, it's because, you know, you deserve to be there. Don't do the crime if you can't pay the, don't do the crime if you can't do the time type thing. Where bail has been, we've been brainwashed to believe that bail is about safety. It's not about safety. It was never supposed to be about safety. And somehow it has been construed into this thing where if you don't have a bail, it means that you're unsafe. No, if you can't afford your bail, it doesn't mean that you're unsafe. It just means that you're poor and that you can't afford it. So bail is supposed to be about making sure a person has skin in the game, that they have a reason to come back to court to resolve their case. It's not about safety. For example, if someone commits a murder and their bail is set at $1 million and they happen to have enough equity in their house, or they're able to get that money from a parent or pull it from their 401k or whatever, if they're able to afford the $100,000 that they would have to pay to a bail bondsman to get out, and they post that bail and they're now out on the streets, are we any safer? Is there still not someone who has committed a crime that is out on the street? So it's not about safety. It's about making sure that you come back to court. And so in St. Louis City, this jail process has been completely, it's run amok, honestly. It's run amok. The judges in St. Louis City have not been providing people the constitutionally required bail hearings that they are supposed to have. The Constitution says that if you are accused of a crime, like, you are supposed to get a bail, you're supposed to be given the least restrictive means to, you know, ensure that you come back to court. That means if you're arrested and accused of a crime, a judge is supposed to ask you, how much can you afford? They're supposed to take your income and your life circumstances into account when deciding how much bail to give. And if they assign you a bail that you cannot afford, then that is unconstitutional. The average income for a family inside of a Black family inside of St. Louis City is about $25,000. The average bail that people are given when they're accused of a crime, regardless of what the crime is $25,000. So if you only make $25,000 a year, how can you afford a $25,000 fine? How can you even afford 10% of that? How can you afford $2,500? That may be more money than you make in an entire month. Paying that bail would mean that you can't pay your rent, you can't pay electricity bill, you can't buy food, you can't survive. So judges are out here giving people bails that they cannot afford, which is how people end up in the workhouse. It's literally the only reason that the workhouse exists. In 2019, January of 2019, Arch City defenders filed a lawsuit against the city of St. Louis and the judges in the 22nd Judicial Court for not following the rules of making sure people have that constitutional bail hearing, where that judge is taking into account your life circumstances and how much you can actually afford. That was in January of 2019. In June of 2019, a federal judge ruled on our side and said, yes, St. Louis City cannot continue to hold people without giving them that constitutional bail hearing that they are supposed to have. We found through our work that there were hundreds of people inside of both the workhouse and CJC located downtown that had not had bail hearings, that had been sitting for weeks and months without having a bail hearing. A judge was just slapping literally an arbitrary number on the bail that these people were given. So after that federal judge came out and said, no, St. Louis City, you cannot do this, every single person that's incarcerated inside of the city, if they haven't had a bail hearing, they must have a bail hearing. St. Louis City held 30 bail hearings a day for a little over a week. And out of the 187 people that had a bail hearing that very first week that judge entered that injunction, Out of 187 people, 119 people were let go to go home, which is how it should be. And we know from study after study after study that when people are left to languish inside of a jail, they plead guilty to things that they may not have done. They take plea deals that are against their own best interest in order to get out of jail. And that is not how the criminal legal system is supposed to work. You should not have to be extorted in these hellhole facilities in order, you know, to get your day in court. And that is very much what's happening inside of St. Louis City. We see it every single day. So when we talk about ending cash bail and the Close the Workhouse campaign, when we talk about ending cash bail is part of this idea of re-envisioning public safety, because people have the right to fight their cases from home. We have found that on average in the city, if you are arrested, you have to wait 10 months in jail before you get your day in court. 10 months, what would 10 months in jail do to you psychologically, emotionally? But then we can talk about economically. You've lost your job, you've lost your housing. If you have children, where are your children? If you had a car, like where is it? Like your whole life can be destroyed in a matter of 10 months. And studies have shown that every 3 months a person spends in jail, every 3 months that a poor person spends in jail, it takes them a year to recover economically. So if you're spending 10 months inside of the workhouse, that means economically it could take as long as 3 years for you to recover, to get your life back on track. And so that's why one of the pillars of the Close the Workhouse campaign and a huge part of the work that we do at Arch City Defenders is about ending cash bail, because it strips people. It's one more thing that strips people of their dignity and their pride by being left inside of these facilities. And it's just flat out unconstitutional. Like, people have a right. People have a right to fight their case from home, and we have to continue to fight to make sure that they can do that. I feel like I said a whole lot in a very short period of time, but if you have any questions, please let me know.
We'll do questions at the end, Inez. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Malik, you're up.
Great. Inez, you did an amazing job at running down the issue, the problem. And I hope that campaign goes well. I was born in the south suburbs of Chicago and raised all over Illinois, and part of my life was spent in St. Louis and Edwardsville, and so I feel a bit a bit of a connection to your campaign, and really hope that you all see success. So let me just start by saying, introducing myself again. Malik Alim. I work for the Chicago Community Bond Fund, which is the convening organization of a coalition called the Coalition to End Money Bond. And so Inez already told you all what the problem of money bond is. It's the exact same in Cook County. It's the exact same in the state of Illinois. So I want to kind of start by giving you all a little story of an event that happened to me. And then I want to tell you about the Pretrial Fairness Act, which is a piece of legislation that we are running in the Illinois State Legislature that will end money bond and limit pretrial incarceration. So when I was maybe 20, 21 years old, I was in college, and I was driving my mother's car back from Springfield to Chicago, and I had to go through a county called Will County, which is just south of Cook County. So I was speeding, I got pulled over, and I got a ticket. I was a college student, so I was very irresponsible. I forgot about my court date. But before forgetting about my court date, I was trying to figure out how do I get from Chicago back to Will County, which is an hour and a half hour drive, I did not have full-time access to my mother's car. So in figuring that out, I did not figure out how to make that work. And then I forgot about my court date. So fast forward 2 years, I'm driving on my way home from Home Depot at like 9 p.m. and I get pulled over on the south side of Chicago. And I was arrested. I had a warrant out for my arrest. My license was suspended. So I don't know if you all have college students in your family or no college students, but oftentimes college students move around a lot, from one part of the year to the next, from summertime to fall. I was moving around a lot. So I did not receive the mail notice that told me that I had a court date that I missed, that then led to my license being suspended, right? So compounding the irresponsibilities of a college student on top of this bureaucracy that we currently have in our criminal justice system, I ended up arrested and was held in Cook County Jail for 5 days before being extradited to Will County Jail, where I was then given a $500 money bond and released after my father paid that money. So I was lucky. Even though I spent a week in jail in 2 different jails, I was lucky because my father had that money to pay to get me out. So let me paint a different picture for you. Imagine if instead of a warrant for my arrest upon missing that court date, I was given a reminder, right? Imagine if instead of being held in jail, instead of having to figure out how I was going to make it to court, I was given some kind of support services, like a bus card, like a train card. Those are the types of things that we've built into the Pretrial Fairness Act, because we feel like the main driver of mass incarceration, as Inez explained, is the money bond system, right? If you have people who are sitting in jail because they have to make a decision, an impossible decision between their freedom and taking a plea deal, you obviously are going to see a ton more people in jail. So the Pretrial Fairness Act is our answer to the money bond system. So if we do away with the money bond system, then what are we left with? Like Inez pointed out, safety is not the reason why we have the bond system. It's to make sure, it is to quote unquote make sure that people come back to court. But I don't know if any of you have ever gotten a speeding ticket or have ever found yourself in the justice system. You want to be done with that, right? You want to go through your court system. You want to pay your fines, and you want to be done with it. You want it out off of your plate. You want to move on with your life. Most people who find themselves in the criminal justice system are not quote unquote criminals. And I hate to even use that word because it's so fraught, but most people who find themselves in the criminal justice system are like you and I, are like your mom, are like your sister, who find themselves in a situation that they have to get out of. So within the Pretrial Fairness Act, there are a few main things that we think will make the pretrial justice system in Illinois a lot more fair. And one of them is offering support services like bus cards, like court reminders, as opposed to warrant for arrest for missing court dates. Another one is to mandate data reporting and data transparency for our county court systems. So in advocating for this bill, we've gone around and talked to a ton of different county officials in different parts of the state. And a lot of the pushback that we hear is that, well, if we don't have this money that we get from our money bonds, then we can't shore up our budgets. We don't have the operating budget to be able to operate the justice system, which is obviously a which is obviously a kind of misprioritization, right? Like if we are funding our county court systems based on the backs of poor people, then we have a problem, and we need to identify a better way to allocate resources. And so in doing this advocacy, we also found that that we got that pushback, but folks did not know how much money that they were receiving from money bonds that were forfeited back to them. So part of our bill mandates that courts that courts report that data and that we are able to see from year to year, how much money are you getting from bonds, how much money in fines and fees, so that we can make sure that we actually allocate those resources in an actual budget process like we should. And so the last thing I want to talk about is kind of the process of what would happen under the Pretrial Fairness Act if it is passed, if you were to be arrested. So currently, usually if you're arrested, you're given one of many different types of bonds. You can get an I bond, which means you don't have to pay any money. You're released on your own recognizance and you're promising to show back up to court. So that's usually lower level offenses or charges. You can also be given a D bond, which is a deposit bond, which is the main one that we've been talking about. So a D bond, you have to pay 10% of the bond amount that has been assigned to you. And you are supposed to receive that at the end of your case. You're supposed to get that back at the end of your case. Under the Pretrial Fairness Act, there would be a robust bond hearing process where people actually sit down in front of a judge with their either their public defender or their counsel, and they have a comprehensive hearing. If any of you have ever sat in a bond court or a bond hearing, it's really remarkable how fast they happen. The judges sometimes will barely even look at the defendant. They don't listen to the tenets of the case. They kind of just arbitrarily are just handing out money bonds at arbitrary amounts. So under the Pretrial Fairness Act, they would get comprehensive bond hearings, and there would have to be a demonstrable risk to a specific person or specific people in order to be able to hold someone in jail, in order to hold someone in jail. So if we without a bond system, there's either you're in jail or you're not, right? So the cite and release part of this process would become enhanced. So police would have more discretion in terms of who they charge with certain crimes and who they give a citation to and release on their own recognizance to show up to court. And that's huge for small locales and small places where, you might see some of the same people turning up in jail for the same reasons or turning up in the drunk tank for the same reasons. And you know that this person isn't a harm to their community, so to speak. They have a problem, right? And we can be, have a more human approach to how we take care of people who find themselves in the criminal legal system. So right now, what we have is more of a punishment bureaucracy than anything else. We're not, as a society, we are not in the business of justice. We're not in the business of rehabilitation when people do find themselves in prison. That is not what we have. And what the Pretrial Fairness Act is attempting to do is to turn our punishment bureaucracy into a more comprehensive justice system that we can be proud of. Yeah, I don't know if I missed anything, Marie. If you can chime in, we're working on the same campaign, so I'll let you fill in any blanks I missed.
Sure. No, Malik, you and Inez have done a great job in laying out all the issues about the cash bond in Illinois and anywhere. Inez, the things that are happening in St. Louis is not the exception. That's the rule. That's how it's happening all over the place. And it's adversely impacting Black and brown people. And just let me tell you guys from a perspective of a former law enforcement officer, I, as a young woman, remember thinking, it just seems like such a problem between Black people and the police. So, and the issue is we don't have enough Black police. So I decided as a young woman that this is what I was going to do. And plus I like fast cars. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'll be able to drive fast with, red lights and siren and all that. So it's going to fix this problem that we have. And so I went to college, got a degree in criminal justice from Bradley University, applied for state police, and after a year, went through the process, got hired. And And immediately I began to see that there was this problem, this culture of people, and in my mind, as a young woman, I thought, oh, he's just a bunch of big bullies, and they're just picking on people, and then I worked in Chicago for a year, and then I transferred back home. I live in East St. Louis, and I transferred back to this district. And it seemed to be that everything they did was about strapping on every gun they own to run down to East St. Louis, to arrest people. And so I had friends who were like Malik said, you get a traffic ticket for something, and then you end up in jail on some $1,000 bond that you can't pay, all based on, because you forgot a court date. And it just seems so unfair, and it is unfair. And so after 12 years as a police officer, I figured out the system could not be fixed. There was no way to fix it. It's got to be changed. So we can't fix cash bail. We got to change it. We got to stop it. We got to pass the Pretrial Fairness Act so that we don't have these things happening to people anymore, and in particularly to Black and brown people. That has been my self-interest, all along, in having people be treated equitably. And that means that we have to have a better system. The system that we have, and once it was only after I became a police officer that I began doing research on the origins of policing in America. And I should have known, once I did that, I said, okay, I see what's happening here. The origins of police came from slave catchers. Police were created to catch slaves. So the slave catchers, went out to catch slaves. And so once slavery was abolished, they took those same people and they made them police officers. So no one, it's a wonder that the system is what it is, because it was designed that way. It's been tainted from the very beginning. And so now here we are with this system that is unjust, because they say criminal justice. Well, yeah, they're right. It's just us. So we have to do something different. And the Pretrial Fairness Act is an act that will change lives. Right now, over 250,000 people are stuck in jail simply because they are poor. And that, this should make people angry. It should make you as faith leaders, I work for United Congregation of Metro East, and we are, we gather our churches and our people of faith to dismantle systems that perpetuate poverty, that perpetuate inequities in systems, and we dismantle those systems. And so this ought to violate your values and make you say, no, this is not what we're going to continue to do. And so, for those who used to be like me and thought, okay, it's we just got to get the right people in the system to make this thing work. I beseech you, no, that's just not going to do it. We got to change this whole system. And we're working, UCM is working with the rest of the network in Illinois to change the system by ending cash bail and passing the Pretrial Fairness Act.
Great. And I just wanted to explain some of these links that I dropped in the chat. If you want to learn more about the Pretrial Fairness Act, you can go to nmoneybond.org/pretrial fairness. And on that page, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there are 2 opportunities that you can participate in advocacy for this bill. The first one is a virtual town hall series that we're hosting. Right now, most of the representatives that will be doing that are based in the Cook County area, but I would want to open it up to you all. You all are leaders in your community in the East St. Louis area and in Maryville. And if you have any connections to legislators who would be interested in participating in a town hall around the money bond, please send them my way. I can drop my email in the chat as well. And then the other one that we're doing is a virtual lobby day. So I'm sure some of you may have been on a lobby day before. We can't do that right now because of COVID. So we're trying to be creative about how we advocate for what we want to see happen in our community. So we're going to have a bunch of different state legislators on our virtual town hall, which will be, on our lobby day, which will be on November 10th. And just to give you all a little bit of update on where we are in the legislative process, because of COVID, the spring legislative session, which was slated to happen late February, early March, was canceled. And right now we are pushing to have a veto session, which is normally scheduled for November, mid-November. So what we've been hearing from people in the state legislature is that there could be a potential for a criminal justice omnibus bill, which would contain a bunch of different things like police accountability, sentencing reform, as well as money bond, or there could be a standalone bill. So we are prepared for either to happen. And just so right now in this fall season, we're just trying to make sure that we do as much as we can to kind of raise the profile of the issue, make sure people understand why we need to end money bond and why we need to do it now. So please click those links. If you are a part of an organization that would like to endorse the Pretrial Fairness Act, I dropped the link to that endorsement form as well into the chat. So your support would be lovely. And I appreciate the time.